Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. This is the 1 hour chart of crude oil provided by netdania.com. You can click on the link below. Now, the saber rattling has kind of died down. It appears that perhaps America's bluff on this one is going to be called. I don't know for sure. We know we're going to have a key vote on September 11th, the same date as the Million Muslim March. So something big is definitely coming, but as I pointed out before, the oil market is not indicating a war. We had a speculative rally here back when they gave that threatened 72-hour action time, and then it was sell-off. Based on that sell-off, I said that we weren't going to see that. Also, based on the price of silver and gold, we'd expect that gold would rally significantly. Of course, silver would have a follow-on effect, but that hasn't really happened. Now, silver is holding above this very important support line that I've been pointing out here. It's roughly 2350, 2370, and you can see I was looking for a reset of the MACD. We were on an overbought condition on the daily. You can see we're now trying to round up just above the positive, just above the zero line in positive territory to make a run at this old high here, right here at about 2510. So that's what we're going to be watching. If we get through that, we could get a quick run at 30, I think, but we'll have to see what the news is on this war, threatened war. And I wanted to cover a couple of videos tonight. Of course, we had the third time announced by the Federal Reserve that we had some kind of mishap with the new $100 bill. So let's watch that video real quick and comment.
Speaking of money, the U.S. Treasury has a new $100 bill designed to stop counterfeiters, but printing problems are delaying its release. And CBS 4's Vanessa Borge explains those problems are costing you and me and everybody millions.
Imagine having $3 billion in cash sitting in front of you, teasing you that you couldn't use. That's what happened to the Federal Reserve this year because the country's money factory messed up one of America's most familiar exports, the $100 bill.
You see that gold on there for the 100?
We estimate that as many as 2/3 of all the $100 notes circulate outside the United States.
According to currency expert Ben Mazzota,
it's certainly one of the most valuable bills to counterfeit.
The mint was supposed to print a new...
And there you have the gold on the right side. You can see a lot of gold now. They're going to call that copper if you listen here.
New design back in 2011, but they keep botching the bill. The first batch ended up with a blank spot, and the second round lifted by thieves on their way to the Federal Reserve.
Now that's a great one. If you believe that, I got a bridge I'd like to sell you.
Now, excess ink.
And ironically, it appears not to be any of those advanced security features themselves which are causing the problem. It's the way the paper that they're using for this generation of printing is responding to the weight of the printing press.
The error could cost taxpayers about $4 million because the current bill costs 7.8 cents to produce compared to 12.6 for the new one.
If you're in the business of counterfeiting, every year that they don't release this is a year that you can pass your old-fashioned $100 bills that much easier.
The government says crisp new bills should be ready to change hands by October 8th. Then the arms race against counterfeiters begins all over again.
Isn't that convenient, delayed right after the budget debate?
A spokesman does say that 1% of the $100 bills that were printed were affected, so not too many of them. The bulk of that batch will be sent back to the Federal Reserve. There will be a sufficient supply to release on October 8th. Vanessa Borge, CBS 4 News Tonight.
So now you think about this. They're talking about releasing these new bills. Now what's going to happen to the old bills? That's the big question. You know that a large number of those bills are held physically outside the United States. This is going to be a very key inflection point because it's going to give them the ability to isolate those bills to know exactly how many there are out there. Of course, they can set a date to call them in. They also have an opportunity to create a two-tier system. There are a lot of things they can do, but they've chosen this date in October, which is right after all the budget debates, probably right after this war debate, October 8th. So everything is heating up, but the fact that they claim that they've made a mistake 3 times in a row. Now, I pointed out before, you know, that if you look at any $100 bill, the latest issue date you find on it is 2009. So we're talking about 4 years without them putting out any new bills as far as date goes and design goes. So something big is coming. We don't know, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, the next video I wanted to review, this is a video, if you remember, I did a video called Taker Nation about the number of Americans that are receiving handouts from the government. And of course, I've talked about the longest time that the number of people who are pulling the cart is dwindling, the number of people who are riding in the cart is growing, and eventually we're coming to the point where it's going to grind to a halt. Now, the Urban Institute has issued a video debunking the myths about who pays no federal income tax. If you remember, Romney was pilloried in the last election about his supposedly secret comment about the 47% that don't pay any income tax. So let's listen to the Urban Institute, which is supposedly a neutral policy think tank. Now, all these think tanks are anything but neutral. The ones on the right are war hawks, and the ones on the left are basically communists. But let's listen to them and try to dissect what they say.
Hi, this is Robert N. Williams, the Saul Prize Fellow at the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center. For the last few years, much has been made about the 47% of Americans who don't But those simple numbers ignore important issues about our tax system. Foremost is the fact that our tax system doesn't just raise revenue. It also delivers a lot of social policy through its many exclusions, exemptions, deductions, and credits.
Now, what does that mean? It doesn't just raise revenue, but it controls social policy by not raising revenue. This is the kind of talk that you get from Democrats and leftists who talk about the fact that someone gets a benefit by the fact that they don't pay any taxes. Well, that's not a benefit. Paying taxes is not something that, you know, or not paying taxes is not some benefit that you get. Paying taxes is a detriment. So they're stating that, well, we've decided to not tax certain groups for social policy, therefore that's a benefit. So you can see they're beginning to twist the argument because they're deceivers. We know that the issue is how many people actually pay taxes. Now, they don't want to address the issue of who actually pays the taxes. They want to talk about people who don't have to pay for various reasons are actually getting something. So you listen as he spins this, and I'll stop it when we get to the homeowners.
The federal income tax encourages people to save for their old age and helps students pay for college. It encourages charitable giving and subsidizes state and local governments. It significantly discounts the cost of home ownership and health insurance obtained through your job.
Now, how does it discount the cost of home ownership or health insurance? Are they saying that because I have an income tax deduction based on the fact that I own a home, that means that I'm getting something from the IRS? No, I'm not getting something from the IRS. Owning my home is not any cheaper because the IRS isn't taxing me on it or giving me a deduction. So again, this is the twist that they have. They're acting like not taking money from you. In other words, the assumption that they have is that they own everything. They deserve to have everything. And the fact that they let you keep something back, they're actually giving you a benefit.
And the tax system encourages people to work by subsidizing wages for low earners and helping to pay for child care.
Now, there's a good one. They're talking about the Earned Income Tax Credit. The Earned Income Tax Credit is something that Clinton created that actually pays people tax money for not working very much. So if you earn, say, $8,000 in a year, you not only don't pay any taxes, but you're actually given a tax refund on taxes that you didn't pay. So the government is literally taking tax money from one person and giving that tax money to another person. Not only is that person not paying any taxes, they're being given the tax money of someone else.
Although people at all income levels claim these subsidies, high-income households benefit the most. Even so, almost all of them still pay some federal income tax.
Okay, now they subtly changed that term. You listen very carefully. He changed the term to subsidies. Now, anybody who's honest will tell you that a subsidy is something you pay for. There's nothing being paid here. They're just simply not taking a certain amount of money. So here's the deception now, and this is what you hear when you talk about tax cuts. Anytime there's a debate about tax cuts, then they ask who will pay for them. Well, that's ridiculous. You don't pay for a tax cut. But because they twist the language, again, these people are deceivers. They're liars. That's their job, is to lie. They call not taking money from you a subsidy.
But tax breaks zero out income taxes for many low and middle income households, making them members of the 47%. Keeping those factors in mind, there are three issues to consider when thinking about who does and doesn't pay federal income taxes. First, let's look at the number itself. In 2010, the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center estimated that 47% of Americans owed no federal income tax. That percentage was even higher the previous 2 years, when it hit 50%. Those numbers were abnormally high, in part because incomes fell during the economic downturn, and in part because Congress and the White House twice cut income taxes to stimulate the economy. Now that the economy's on the mend, and most of the tax stimulus measures have expired, more Americans pay federal income taxes. This year, we anticipate that only 43% of Americans won't owe federal income tax.
But even though more Americans supposedly are paying income tax, they're not bringing in any more money. Why is that?
And that percentage will continue to decline over time, falling to 34% in 2022. Second, just because 43% of Americans won't pay federal income tax this year doesn't mean they won't pay any taxes. Far from it. When we account for payroll taxes, property taxes, state and local income taxes, sales taxes, gas taxes, and sin taxes on tobacco and alcohol, it's nearly impossible for a person to avoid paying at least some tax.
Right, but the debate wasn't about whether or not they pay taxes. The debate was about the fact that they don't pay any income taxes and that we have a budget deficit that's exploding and that the tax revenues don't cover the amount of spending. So again, here is a deception trying to twist the argument.
Finally, let's take a look at the people who make up this year's 43%. 2/3 of them work and thus owe payroll taxes. That FICA deduction on your pay stub for taxes that fund Social Security and Medicare.
Did you hear that? Taxes that fund Social Security and Medicare. So now they're admitting that it's part of the general fund.
Most Americans too little income to owe income tax. And almost all of the rest earn less than $20,000 a year. They're just plain poor. We're still following Ronald Reagan's 1986 decision that families below the poverty level shouldn't pay federal income tax.
Oh, you see, it's Reagan's fault that now, more than 20 years later, when we have looming economic depression under Obama, that these sorts of things are happening.
So who's left? About 1%. Some are investors who get most of their income from tax-exempt interest on municipal bonds. Some give a lot to charity, or have already paid tax on income earned abroad. And others have big medical bills, large business losses, or other situations that wipe out the income taxes they owe Uncle Sam. Our system may be convoluted and hard to understand, but a nuanced look shows it's not just a system for makers and takers.
So here you have the lunatic left, I'll call them, trying to spin the fact that not only does half the population not pay any income tax, but a significant percentage of them actually get the income taxes that are paid by other people that are transferred to them, whether it's through earned income tax credit or something else. So they're trying to spin things, but the fact remains that the tax revenues, if you remember, I talked about the unemployment numbers. The number you want to look at is the labor participation rate. Now the mainstream media is starting to talk about it because they just can't avoid talking about it because the alternative media is talking about it so much. And then the other number that they can't fake, and it's the most important number of all, is income tax revenues. The reason why is because they can fake the job revenues and tell you that a part-time job is a full-time job, but the one thing they can't fake is the amount of tax revenues that they bring in. So if they replace a full-time worker with a part-time worker, or if you have everybody who used to earn a good amount of wages getting minimum wage, or all the other variables that you have in there that they don't track, that all actually ends up coming out in the mix when you look at the number of dollars that are brought in by taxes. Now, I've pointed out to you that for going on over 6 months now, they have capped the national debt at a number. We don't know where they're getting the money from, but they're either borrowing or stealing or lying about that money. So obviously the tax revenues aren't coming in. If you remember back in the last tax season, there was supposedly a big boost in tax revenues. Well, that's obviously not the case because we're hard limit up against a cap, and we're waiting for the next congressional session to have this debate. So we're waiting for the debate about this war, we're waiting for this debate about the deficit and the budget, and we're waiting for the new $100 bill to come out. So a lot of things are on the horizon. Silver looks like it wants to rise into the next leg. The next target is going to be $30. We'll be watching that very closely, and we'll talk to you next time.